Our next testimony is Christina. I hope I pronounced that right. She's a licensed substance abuse counselor and a certified peer support specialist who works for Rogers Behavioral Health as a liaison for their addiction services line. She's been in recovery for almost 6 years from opiates and has dedicated her life to helping others gain access to resources for their own recovery. She's currently working on completing her master's degree in behavioral health psychology at Carroll College, with her plans to pursue her PhD in organizational leadership next fall. She can usually be found spending all her time with her 10-year-old daughter, usually going on the outdoor adventures and playing Fortnite together or trying new restaurants. We're really wonderfully blessed to be able to have her come forward, and let's give a warm welcome to Christina.
Right. So grateful to be here. Lord, thank you for asking me to do this and share my testimony. My name is Christina, and like Lori had said, I was an IV opiate heroin addict for many years. And I'm going to share a little bit about what my life looked like then, just to build some context to understand really what God did for me and continues to do. But I think the most important piece for me to talk about with people is what he then did now and what he continues to do, right? So we'll go back a little bit. I am 35 years old, and I feel like that is a salient piece, and we'll come to that in a minute. I was adopted as a baby. I was 10 weeks old. My birth mom was 16 when she had me. And she went through the Evangelical Christian Foundation for Adoption, and she picked my parents. And they were the best parents you could possibly imagine. They were 40 years old when I came along. They had waited on a wait list for adoption for 10 years and went through 2 failed adoptions where the birth mom changed her mind. So by the time I came around, I got all the attention, right? I had all of their love and attention. And so I think that's an important piece to talk about, is that my upbringing was ideal. I was born and raised in this beautiful Christian home. We went to church every Sunday. My dad was an elder in the church. I was involved in Sunday school, the youth group. I went to a Christian private high school, Heritage Christian, still around, Patriot. By all accounts, my life was going the way that it should, right? But what I didn't know then, that I do know now, is that I had this need to escape my reality at any cost. It didn't matter what that was, if that was boys in high school, or if it was trying different substances to fit in. It didn't matter. And so that continued for a few years until I met my soon-to-be husband at that time. And it was a whirlwind. I found myself pregnant after knowing him for 3 to 4 months. And my parents were like, well, you're getting married. That is what you have to do. And so we did. And I jumped into things, and I did not know everything that would come about later on, such as he had very violent tendencies. He would get extremely angry and would take that out on me. He also had some addictions that he had hidden very well. And so this goes on. I go to deliver our daughter, and I ended up almost losing her in the process in the hospital. So I was rushed in for an emergency C-section. And at that time, the recovery process was that they would just throw a bunch of painkillers at you, right? This was back in 2013, 2014. And so the highest amount of opiates that you could possibly give somebody for up to 4 months was provided to me. I was rehospitalized one other time for complications from the C-section. And so in the midst of this, my environment is not going well, but I don't want to tell anybody because I want everyone to think that I've got this all together, that I can handle this, I'm in control of it. I go through this traumatic delivery. My home environment is not going well in any capacity. And so these pills, man, did they make me feel good. I felt happy. I felt like I could do things. And before I knew it, at the end of that 4 months when that script ran out, I found myself physically dependent on it. And I didn't know what to do. And I said to my husband at that time, I think there's something going on. I don't feel good. Woke up that morning, the prescription had run out. And I'm thinking the response is going to be, oh no, take some time, like what do you need? And instead, that was the day that I found out that he was a heroin addict. And he saw his opportunity. And he said, you're not sick, you don't have the flu. I know exactly what's wrong and I'll be right back. And so this kicked off tumultuous and very chaotic heroin addiction. Within 2 years, the business that we owned at that time, which was a very, very successful roofing company, gone. The home that we owned on 3 acres of land, gone. We found ourselves homeless. My parents had to come in and take guardianship of my daughter. And the next few years were spent in and out of jail. I remember every single time that I would go into jail and I would be going through withdrawal. And I would pray to God, I know that I haven't been the best, but I swear if you let my probation officer let me out tomorrow, I'm going to go to church and I'm going to turn this around. Every single time I would say that. And every single time that I would get out, that is not at all what I would do, right? I go right back. And so this continued on for a good chunk of time. And then in 2019, I hit a breaking point, which is interesting because everyone talks about their rock bottoms. And hypothetically, I had every rock bottom you could possibly imagine. I remember each time I hit a rock bottom, and I think, well, it can't get lower than this, it would have a basement, and we'd fall right below, right? And there was another one, and another one, and another one. And so finally, my rock bottom, if you will, really wasn't bottom. It came on the floor of our kitchen that my mother-in-law had purchased this home to try and get us together and like get us moving, and it was not working. And I was just sobbing. And I called my mom, and she was like, oh, "You've done this how many times? How many times have I taken you to Rogers to go and detox? And you've done the outpatient, and you've tried all these things before." And I said, "I don't know, Mom, but I can't do this anymore. I cannot do it." And so she came and she picked me up and she took me to Rogers, the one in West Dallas that I had been in, I don't know how many other times before. And I remember when I was walking in that day, and I had asked myself, I remember thinking, what am I doing? What am I doing? Like we've been here before. I've done this before. What is different? What are we going to get out of this? What I didn't know then, that I do know now, is that God never stopped working in my life. He was just waiting for the right moment for me to finally say, I can't do this anymore. And so God's graces and His mercies started the minute I walked through that door. And I'm going to explain that, because it's my favorite thing to tell. I went on to inpatient, and I was paired up with the same doctor I had all the other times. He sat across from me, and he looked at me and said, "Friend, what are we doing? What are we doing?" I said, I don't know. I have no idea what we're doing. He said, well, I really think this time we need to do something a little bit more. He said, I'm worried about you. I'm afraid that you're not going to be here anymore. And so his recommendation was residential. Man, that was a terrible word for me. I said, I can't do 30 days. And he looked at me and he said, oh, do you have something more important. Do someplace more important thing need to be? And I couldn't say anything to that. He then said, we have a residential program in Oconomowoc. It's called the Harrington Center for Addiction Recovery. He said, but that has a 3-month wait. You will be dead by the time they get to that. He said, but we just built a Harrington here in West Dallas, and it's opening in 3 days. I'm going to put a hold on you because he knew me. If I had gone home, we were not coming back. He said, I'm going to put a hold on you, and we'll walk you up so that you can do residential here. I said, okay. So I get up to residential, I get on the Harrington, and I'm about 2 weeks in, and they pulled me on a group, which I know now from working there, we don't do that. So they came and pulled me from group, and they said, you have a phone call from someone from the building. I said, well, okay. So I went, and I picked up the phone, and the guy on the other end said, ma'am, I'm not sure how to tell you this. He said, but there was a mistake when you were admitted. He said, I don't know how this happened. He said, but when we ran your insurance benefits for residential, it showed you had benefits, but somehow someone else's insurance card was put into your chart, and they have residential benefits, but you do not. Those aren't my problem. Well, what would you like me to do? And so he said, you've already been in there for 2 weeks. We don't want to disrupt your treatment, so we're going to scholarship you so that you can remain, okay? And I said, okay. To me, at that time, I didn't understand some of the moves that God was already starting to make, right? So I called my mom and my dad, and I told them what was happening, and I said, I can't wait to come home, because I was going to go to their house. That was my plan. And my dad said, where? I said, I can't wait to come home. And he said, Christina, you're not allowed on our property right now. We need you to do sober living. And I said, oh, what? I'm doing 30 days here. What do you mean? You need me to do more? I've been working so hard. I've been doing all these things. And he said, no. So they called around, and someone from our church who told them about an amazing sober living in Milwaukee called Fourth Dimension. And so I left Harrington. I ended up being the first person to graduate Harrington, which was wild, and it was only because of the insurance issues and the scholarship stuff. But I promise we will come back to that in a minute too. So I went to Fourth Dimension, which, if you're not familiar, they are a sober living, but they also offer built-in PHP IOP, which is day treatment. And so you're still getting around-the-clock care, treatment, therapy, trauma therapy built into your living situation while going to meetings at night and getting connected to more resources. And I was loving it. I was there for a few weeks. And the program director called me in his office and he said, I don't know how to tell you this. And I was like, this is becoming a calendar. He said, we just got a phone call that your husband just dropped you and your daughter off of his insurance. And so you no longer have any benefits, and because of that, you cannot stay in the treatment house. I just remember feeling so defeated, didn't know what to do. And so we sat and we talked for a while, and I got up, I started to walk out. And my dad at the time, he was the senior executive vice president of a bank. The man was busier than you could possibly imagine. There was no rhyme or reason for it, but as I walked out of his office, my dad was walking through the center doors. And I said, what are you doing here? And he said, well, I was coming down to check up on you. He was smart, he would bring gift cards for groceries, not cash. And if you know anything, I was not to be trusted with cash. And so he walked in and he saw me crying, and I told him what had happened. And he went in and spoke with the program director, and he came out a short time after, and he said, we do not want you to call me again until you've completed this program. And he walked out. He had written a check to fourth dimension to cover my rent and my treatment costs for the next 4 months. Looking at that today, I said, Dan, that was like the worst investment you could have made because you had no idea what the return on that investment was going to be, right? So I got to stay at fourth dimension, and throughout that time, I could feel something inside of me growing, and it was this fire. It was this passion that I started to feel, that I felt so strongly, that I needed to be able to go back and help the people who were struggling the way that I once was, right? And I didn't know what to do with that. Here I am at 5 months sober, right? Like, what do I do with this? Where do I go with this? What do I have to give? I started and went and got my peer support specialist certification, which is for folks who have lived experience, and you get a pretty intensive training, and you have to pass a state exam to be able to go and help other people who are struggling. And I figured I can do that. I don't have a degree. I can at least do that, right? And throughout that process, God placed some amazing people in my life who really started to show me and guide me that I had nothing to be ashamed of. And I think one of the most powerful pieces that I've learned is that if you are somebody who has come out on the other side, you have a unique ability and gift to be able to speak to the fact that God's grace and mercy, it does not know any bounds. That He is the breaker of chains. And the reason I know this is because if you go through the Bible, who did He use? He did not use the perfect. He did not use the sinless. He used the bruised, the downtrodden, the broken. That's who He used to carry His message. And that is nothing to be ashamed of. I always thought that I was inherently bad. I was a bad person. I'm not. I'm a human being who experienced some pain and really desperately wanted an escape from that pain. And instead of searching where I should have been, where I knew would have been fulfilling, I went the easier route. I went to that instant gratification relief reality. I think the most beautiful piece about this is that I worked some odd jobs. COVID happened, so work was a little difficult. But I finally built up the courage one day. I was a year and a half sober, and I applied at Rogers in West Adams. And I wanted to work as a tech on inpatient. I was very ambitious. And I said, I want to go where the detox people are. And I got hired. I could not believe it. I pulled in for my first day, and I got there early. I got there early because I really wanted to soak in that moment. That just a year and a half earlier, I had walked in here, completely hopeless, completely broken, and now I was in the same parking lot about to walk in the same building that the organization that helped save my life to get back. And I couldn't walk in. I mean, I was sobbing. And so I just remember praying. I was like, Lord, help me get this together because I gotta go in for my shift. I was there for about a month, and word started to get around that I was working there. And so one day I came in and I got pulled to the side, and they asked, would you like to ever work on residential? And I said, sure, I would love to do that. That had always been, I'd always wanted to work on Harrington, on the exact treatment program that changed my whole life. And so I went upstairs and I got to walk on the unit. I got to walk on Harrington, but not as a resident. I had to walk on Harrington as an employee. They were paying me to walk on that unit. And my manager, who ended up becoming my manager at the time, she looked at me and she said, I wasn't here when you went through here, but everyone is telling me about you and we need you over here. And I said, okay, well, I have a peer support specialist certification and I'm working on my substance abuse counselor license. And she said, you're hired. You're hired. She said, how would you like to be our peer support addiction counselor? I just started bawling. And I'll probably start crying. But to be able to be given this gift, to work on the exact same treatment center that I should have never even been on because my insurance did not provide coverage for it, and then to be the first person to graduate that program, and then to be able to work with those residents every single day, I maintain it was the honor of my lifetime to be able to be their addiction counselor for 4 years. And I would still be doing it, but God had other plans. About 3 years, well, I was 31 when I went back to school. And I did not think that I was going to be good at it. Because I did not think that I was going to be very successful. And I completed my undergrad, my bachelor's in psychology in 3 years. And I ended up graduating with a 4.0. Right? So that's not bad. I think it's a testament to when you really find your passion of what you want to do, you will go to any lengths to do that, right? Well, I decided I wanted to apply for a master's program. And so a year and a half ago, I went to our medical director. And the medical director, he was my doctor when I was on inpatient. And I said, would you be willing to write me a letter of recommendation? And he said, oh, Christina, I would love to do that. And I said, okay. The therapist that I had when I was on Harrington still worked there. And so I went up to her and I asked her, and she said, I would love to do that. And so I was trying to collect these letters of recommendation. And all of a sudden one day they pull me in and they say, Christina, we're going to ask you to train a new addiction counselor. She just started in Oconomowoc and she's going to come here and we're going to have you train her. I said, that's great. Who is it? And they tell me the name. And I thought, certainly that can't be right. So the woman walks in. It was my probation officer. She had left the field of probation and parole and decided she wanted to work in the field of behavioral health as an addiction counselor. And guess who was going to train her? I said, is this as awkward for you as it is for me? I'm good. So she is now the director of our Family and Friends program, and I work very closely with her. But we love to make people uncomfortable by telling them that story as often as we possibly can. But I was very content at Harrington. I was very comfortable there. That was my home, right? I thought surely this is where God wants me. No. God's plans are a little bit different than the perfect plan that we normally have in mind. Our executive director of addiction services created a position for me because she saw something in me. I think she saw my passion, my excitement, and my willingness to go to any length to help other people. And so they created this position where I would be able to go and have full autonomy in bridging the gap between recovery communities, the churches, the jails, and the people that we serve every single day. And that has been an absolute joy and honor. And if you would have told me that I would be loving every second of that today, I don't think I would have believed you. Because I really believe that my calling was at Harrington. And so I go back to Harrington as much as I can, and I speak, and I still plan events for them because it will always hold a special place in my heart. But it has been so abundantly evident to me that when we start doing the next right thing, not just for our recovery, but on the path that God has chosen for us, some of the most incredible and amazing doors start to open, and you really start to see this path. If you would have told me that my probation officer would be I would train her one day, and then she would be working with me in this capacity, or that the doctor that I always had on inpatient would then be the medical director who would write me a letter of recommendation for my master's program. I would have told you that you were insane. But that's God's plan. And so I think one of the most important pieces that I've had to learn in my recovery is that my way is not the right way. Because clearly, when we try to do it Christina's way, it does not end up very well. But when I just surrender and I say, God, I don't understand what's happening right now. I don't maybe love what's happening right now, but I am going to trust you. It always does work out. I had said to Lori earlier, I said, whatever's supposed to happen, whatever is meant to happen, it always does. Right? And I don't always love that. I don't always like the way that it turns out. But I always know sometime down the road, the reason why that happened that way. That God had been planting those seeds all the way. I still do a lot of work with Fourth Dimension. I've tried to get back to them as much as I possibly can. I've helped negotiate and get scholarships for dozens of people in the recovery community that did not have any insurance. Because I really think that it's important that when you are able to climb out of this pit, I always think of it as this ladder in this really, really deep hole that you finally make it to the top of that ladder, finally get out of that hole, that pit. I think a lot of people find joy and they continue on with their life. And they forget that there's other people that are trying to climb up that ladder. And I don't fault them for that. But what God instilled in my heart and this passion of mine was that I was given the ability to turn around and make sure that ladder was held sturdily there. And I've been able to help other people up that ladder. And that's not because of me. That's because of what God has done through me, the work that He has been able to make possible, and the opportunities that He's been able to make possible. And I think that's the biggest testament of everything. So I appreciate having this opportunity to come talk with you guys and share just what the Lord has done. And I appreciate every one of you guys for being here. Thank you.